I'm Patricia, and I've got a terrible story for you. Well, the story itself is quite typical, but the circumstances makes it really trashy. You'd really put it to use if you were a filmmaker, I suppose. My family is rich. Of course, we're not billionaires, and you won't find us in the Forbes list. Still, we've got a mansion in the nicest part of Miami, several yachts, and some cool cars in the garage. All this belongs to my parents, not to me. But I've already met several thugs who've tried to get to my mom and dad's wallets through me. That's how I got used to being alone since I was a child. And I can recognize those who are only interested in my money as soon as they start talking. My parents were always busy with anything except my upbringing, so they took care of it by hiring a nanny, a woman who lived in our house, and well, nursed me. Her responsibilities included catering to any of my whims and controlling my studies. Some think that a child from a rich family isn't obligated to study. Well, that's not my case. I've been constantly studying since my childhood. When I was 3, I already spoke 2 languages with ease. At the age of 5, I was able to read, write, and paint with watercolors. As a 7-year-old girl, I was already an expert in etiquette, knew how to dance, rode a little fat pony named Cookie, and did a lot of other activities. Mind you, those were still my preschool years. My parents never allowed me to do whatever I wanted just because we were rich. My peers at school had as much fun as they wanted and never actually bothered themselves. Their thoughts were occupied with the best flights and parties for weekends and yacht cruises during the holidays. A majority of them lived careless lives since they were 11 years old or so. In fact, they often received grades only because they were present at classes. My parents were different. The older I got, the more they were trying to control my grades and studies. Of course, they rarely bothered to check everything themselves. But the same nanny, a teacher hired for this exact reason, and personal tutors sent them reports every day. So I was forced to cram. Dad had a special gimmick. He used to ambush me in the hallway and run a speed test. Usually, he asked me several questions on literature or history, and sometimes he threw a math problem at me. I had to give him an answer in 10 seconds. If I failed to provide him with a correct answer, it costed me all of my pocket money. With a life like this, I turned into a local nerd and crammer, far from a school celebrity. I've managed to obtain a romantic relationship only in high school. The guy was not one of my classmates. He was an ordinary boy, my peer, who worked as a barista in my favorite cafe. We talked several times, and then we started dating. I liked that he was just a simple, ordinary guy. Besides, he wasn't interested in my money. In fact, Mark immediately told me that he couldn't afford to take me to expensive restaurants and asked me not to take him there on my terms, 'cause letting me pay for us both was humiliating for him. Because of that, he advised me to find another guy if I wasn't okay with picnics in the countryside and movies once a week. Well, it suited me just fine. I even fell in love with this peculiar charm of a simple life. Mom once told me that this was not for long, and soon I'd be asking him for something that he'd be unable to give me. She also predicted that one day I would understand that me and Mark were from different worlds, and our love will end. Yet, I didn't want to believe her, and continued dating Mark. By that time, my nanny retrained into a housekeeper, and was put in charge of maids, cooks, and other workers. I intersected with her much less than before, but I still considered her to be my closest friend. In fact, she was more of a family to me than even my parents. And of course, I told her everything and asked her for advice about my relationship. And then I brought Mark home for a first meeting with my parents. Mom and Dad only looked at him once or twice, and then completely forgot about him. They just began to chat with each other about their own problems right at the dinner table, and paid no attention to us whatsoever. I knew that it was their normal behavior and kind of rolled with that. Mark, however, he seemed to think that that was their signal to him. Now, he became sure that he was considered unworthy of me. So, I decided to somehow gloss over my boyfriend's first impression of my family and introduced him to my nanny. She piled him with questions. It was a real interrogation. She asked him about his attitude towards me, our prospects, and plans for the future, and somehow Mark still left pleased. And later, I noticed that Mark distanced himself from me. He pretended to be busy, told me that he had a lot of work to do, that he had to meet with friends, and so on and so forth. Yet somehow, he managed to find time for all of that earlier and still date me, and now he wasn't able to spend any time with me at all. And the nanny changed as well. You see, I was somehow used to the fact that she was always nearby. I paid zero attention to her appearance or behavior outside of our chats. But now she began to bloom like a rose, and I suddenly noticed that she was only 40 years old, even younger than my mom, and that she was still quite a pretty woman. We had a talk, and she admitted that she had found a boyfriend. I was very glad for her because she definitely deserved personal happiness. I even presented her with some of my old collection dresses so that she could impress her boyfriend with her looks. Our figures were more or less similar at the moment, so everything went out fine. My life went on. Everything seemed to be perfect, until Mark suddenly broke up with me. That day, I rushed to Nanny in tears looking for comfort and advice, and I didn't find her. I saw both of them instead, lying on the bed in her room, and Mark kissed her the way he never kissed me, with so much love and passion. It was a real nightmare. That day, my heart broke twice. First from the breakup with my beloved, and then from my nanny's betrayal. And that betrayal was much more painful. I simply deleted Mark from my life, and Dad fired the nanny as soon as I asked him to do so and explain the situation. Of course, she tried to explain herself. She even had the nerve to say that she was not guilty of anything, but I didn't want to listen to her excuses. I trusted her and she betrayed me.
My name is Barbara, and I'm Pat's former nanny. Here is my vision of what happened to us. Decide for yourself whether I really deserved condemnation or not. I raised Pat from birth. I was 23 and just graduated when her parents found me and offered me a lucrative job. And I spent all of my youth on the upbringing of this girl. I loved her, yes, but she wasn't my daughter, and that says it all. The terms of my contract were quite oppressive. I simply did not have the opportunity to date someone or, moreover, to start my own family. And I've been always dreaming about a large family with a loving husband and many kids. Pat became a surrogate child of sorts to me. I tried to replace her mother, read her bedtime stories, held her hand when she was ill, and catered to all of her whims. Sometimes even in contravention with her parents' direct instructions. I thought that the girl deserved some happiness. When Pat grew up, they still didn't fire me. Her parents offered me a higher salary, better conditions, even made me a housekeeper as a sign of gratitude. But I didn't stay because of that. I stayed because I wanted to be near Pat. I'm sure that my girl loved me too. I was her mom, psychologist, and best friend at the same time. Although I certainly wanted her to communicate more with peers and boys, I was still pleased that she did not turn away from me with age. And then she found Mark. I was glad that Pat finally had someone close to her except me. Until I met him personally, that is. He was only 17, just like Pat, but he seemed to be very smart, and he talked like he'd seen much. Of course, I was not going to woo him. The very idea seemed ridiculous. After all, he was still a young boy, and I looked like an old woman compared to him. Besides, Pat was like a daughter to me, and I could not do such a rotten thing to her. But Mark couldn't be bothered with such trifles as age or different social status. He came to me himself, asked me to meet him at the back door in secret from Pat and her parents, and told me that he loved me. I literally tried to drive him away with a broom. I was afraid that someone had seen him. The gossiping maids, Pat's parents, Patricia herself, after all. But at some point, I really wanted to believe him. And it was my big but very happy mistake. Yes, I'm aware that we've got a pretty large age difference, but due to his age, he could have been my son. That in my age, I should have been thinking about the soul and not looking at young boys. But when a woman had long ago gave up her happiness, and then it unexpectedly came to her itself by literally knocking on her door, Nothing really mattered anymore. I've been dreaming about it my whole life. I had to choose between Pat and my own happiness, and I selfishly chose myself. More precisely, it was Mark who chose me, and I just let the thing slide. And I still blame myself for it. But you see, Patricia is young, and she has her whole life waiting ahead of her, and there will be many more guys who want to be with her. I really wish her to find that one and only in the future. And this was my last chance for happiness, so I went for it. You can judge me, scold me. You can tell me that I'm initially wrong. I already know this and continue to blame myself for my weakness. But at the same time, I know that I really deserve to be loved for all those. Hello, people. I'm Linda, and my story describes how your relatives can become really imprudent if they're not put in their place on time. And also just the fact, if you've got a younger brother, there's a high probability that he'll become your worst enemy. Our family has 2 children, me and my brother Dan. He's a bit younger than me. We're separated by only 1 year, but he's very nasty. We used to fight a lot, and then our parents scolded both of us. Well, what could you do if Dan was a real moron? Should I keep silent or something? Well, if you have a younger brother yourself, you'd definitely understand me. When both of us hit 15, our quarrels pretty much ceased. No, that didn't mean we've finally found a font of family love inside our hearts. Guess he finally became a grown-up and stopped being a little brat. But mostly we just avoided each other. We were really good at it, in fact. Well, our house is a small one, but we had no desire to communicate at all. Dan had his own room, and I had mine, and somehow we silently agreed to never ever visit each other. My brother and I kept to this agreement, even when we were at war with each other. We were only allowed to open the door to the other's room and yell at the enemy from the doorstep. Moreover, this rule also applied to our parents too, to some extent, of course. Mom and Dad tried not to get involved in our conflicts, but they really respected our personal space. The agreement also had a downside. You see, we always had to clean our rooms by ourselves, without any help. Therefore, Dan's room was always a complete mess. 10 cups lined up on the table, floor covered with a makeshift carpet of scraps and pieces of paper, you know. And I always tried to keep my room as orderly as possible. Frankly speaking, my room was always crystal clear. That's why I always knew the exact location of each and everything I owned. Yet once I noticed that something very strange was going on. It looked like someone was toying with my stuff from time to time. He or she never took anything, but I often found the cosmetics, the reading lamp, and all the simple little things misplaced. First I thought that my mom was involved, but she denied it. But then something unprecedented happened. Several pairs of my panties just disappeared. Besides, the unknown thief didn't take my normal underwear. That person aimed at the most expensive, lacy, cute panties that I bought secret from my mother. I wore those only on special occasions and kept them in a secret drawer of the dresser. I even washed them secretly in the sink while no one was watching. But now, each time I digged through the drawer, I saw that some of my cute panties had disappeared. I don't have a lot of those, so I soon noticed the theft. But who would ever think of stealing someone else's underpants? This was some premium level bullshit. I could have assumed that Mom discovered my secret cachet and now used the panties to play with Dad. But it was actually impossible. You see, my mother is a woman of ample girth, and she wouldn't even fit into my clothes. Of course, I couldn't even imagine my dad and my brother rummaging through my panties. Dan was a moron, of course, but not a complete idiot. I even started checking at my panties every morning and evening. Yet the mysterious thief must have noticed that I stopped coming for my stuff. Guess he or she was content with the 3 pairs of panties he'd stolen before. I found the thief by chance. Once, after another quarrel, I went to Dan's room. Well, I didn't actually enter it because of the aforementioned taboo. We didn't finish sorting things out, so I just wanted to finish the talk and stood there at the doorway, yelling. His room was a mess, as always, so at first I didn't even notice anything wrong. But then I looked closer and I saw my panties on my brother's bed. I wasn't even specifically looking for them. I didn't even think that Dan was somehow connected to the missing panties case. Naturally, I immediately threw a tantrum. I still can't believe what Dan told me and my parents. It turned out that this genius set up a business aimed at the other juvenile perverts. He stole my underpants and sold them on eBay. And he even told us that he made a lot of money out of it. He said that he had been planning to save up and buy me some new panties before I noticed the theft. Wow, I was more observant than he expected. I was so shocked. Just imagine that some weirdo sells your underwear to God knows who, and then the buyer definitely does some crazy, creepy stuff with it. Ew, no. It's horrible to say the least. Well, I definitely didn't love my brother too much before, but at least I recognized him as a part of my life. But after such a revelation, I feel completely different now. I politely asked Dan to stay as far away as possible from me. Got a good lock put on my door, and my parents did not even say a single word to me about that. In fact, I suppose that Mom also got a lock for the parents' bedroom. I swear I heard the sound of clipped hinges. And then I also told everyone at school about my brother's dirty dealings. So now Dan received his just due of shame. Well, at least the girls taught him a lesson or two. Some guys even consulted with him about the best-selling kinds of underpants. Such morons!
Hi guys, hi girls. I'm Dan, and as you've understood, I am Linda's brother. Well, a pervert brother, as they call me at home now. But in fact, everything was different. You see, actually, I had no panties selling business. I have always envied those guys whose older sisters and brothers are good and kind. For some reason, my relationship with Linda and I was always sour. I guess the main reason for that was her jealousy of parents. Besides, both of us have a nasty temper and are better off avoiding each other. When we became teenagers, our eternal conflict had only intensified. But I wasn't actually upset by her insults lately. I've got more serious questions to pay attention to. When I became a teenager, I suddenly realized that the girls around me were beautiful, but not in the way guys usually think. That is, I could objectively assess that my female classmates were beautiful, but I felt zero romantic feelings about them. At first, I thought that my time was yet to come, but later, after a physical education lesson in our locker room, I realized that the matter was different. I don't know whether I'm gay or not. Haven't tried it yet, as they say. But soon I realized that I liked the girls' makeup and style of clothing. I wanted to try something like that too. And here's how it all connects to my panty thieving ways. You see, my mom doesn't wear makeup. I don't really know why. To my mind, she'd look much better with a little lip gloss and mascara. Of course, I didn't tell her that. Her body and appearance are her own business, and I have no right to judge her. That's why I started my cross-dressing adventures by sneaking into Linda's room and using my sister's makeup bag. Yeah, I was ashamed, but what else could I do? I wasn't able to just come to the supermarket and buy all those things myself. Our whole city would definitely start gossiping about me wearing makeup. I certainly didn't want that, so I had to steal some from Linda. It was really difficult for me to sneak into my sister's room because Linda is paranoid to the extreme. For example, she actually measures the distance from a pencil to a notebook each time so that the angle is strictly 180 degrees. So before entering the room, I usually took pictures of everything and then returned all of the things to where they used to be according to the photos. Judging by the fact that Linda didn't raise the alarm immediately, I was successful. But soon I discovered that makeup alone was not enough for me. Now I really wanted to see how I'd look in a dress or in some other girly outfit. You sure understand that it was even more difficult to do than to steal makeup. It only took a second for me to take a lipstick or a mascara tube out of the makeup bag. But now I had to open the closet, grab the dress off the rack, put it on, and then put it back without leaving any wrinkles. Those guys in Saw had it easier, seriously. And I actually faced quite the severe penalty for failure. So I decided to take something less noticeable. And then I remembered about Linda's dresser. I know that it was a stupid idea all along, and I shouldn't have stolen such intimate things, but I still did it. I wasn't really interested in my sister's normal panties, and it was far more dangerous to try to steal some of those. So I decided to take some of the lace panties from her secret drawer. Well, only Linda believes that it's secret. In fact, all our family knows about it. Mom, Dad, me, even the neighbor's cat that once managed to climb there for a nice nap. That's why it was very easy for me to take everything I needed. Besides, I had a 100% guarantee that Linda would not immediately throw a tantrum if she noticed something missing. It was her secret drawer. You see? Linda is mean and all, but she's very predictable, and sometimes that's a blessing. You already know what happened next. When I took the first and the second pair of panties, it went so well that I relaxed and lowered my guard. Such a stupid mistake. I forgot to hide the panties under my pillow. And when everything fell apart, it was actually easier for me to think up something crazy than to confess that in fact I like to wear women's clothing. I can't really explain that. At the moment, I honest to God thought that it was better to be branded as a panty seller than to confess about the passion for cross-dressing. Of course, I've become an outcast in my own family. Mom, Dad, and Linda even refused to communicate with me for some time, but soon they calmed down. A new scandal happened, and people switched their attention to it. There were still conflicts in the family, but now I actually thought up a way to buy all the things I need. The trick is simple. I tell the seller that I want to buy a gift for a girlfriend, and they have no reason to disbelieve me. I've got no intention to make a coming out anytime soon, and I hope that Linda and my parents will never find out why I stole my sister's pen.
Hi guys and girls, I'm Erica, and I live in a horrible foster family. Just remember all those awful foster families from various series. Double up these horrors, and you'll have my mom and dad. Lucky me. Soon I'll be 16 and be able to move away. When I was small, I was the happiest child in the world. My parents loved me, cared about me, tried to make my life as happy as possible. I didn't notice the moment when everything changed. My nightmare began with the word no. The majority of children hear it every day. But for me, who wasn't really used to being denied, it became a real tragedy. When they forbade me to use the children's slide because I was in a white skirt, I threw a tantrum, fell into a puddle on purpose, and ruined our planned trip to the park. That's when I learned that parents could not only kiss, but also punish, and the punishment was hard. I was forced to kneel on a bench in the corner of our house, and if you think that this punishment was just a joke, I dare you to try it yourself. For a child, it was very painful to kneel on a wooden bench for half an hour, and then the bench became my best friend, because we met again and again almost each day. No matter what I did, everything caused a negative response of my parents, and I was punished again and again, and I behaved worse and worse out of sheer spite. The situation reached a point where my dad punished me with a strap, and this was actually a real beating. Of course, I could not complain to anyone because I was ashamed, and no one would believe me, and I suffered even more because of that. I began to run away from home, just not to be near my parents, and that only made everything worse, because the punishments were getting more and more obscene. Have you ever been locked in a hospital? Well, they actually locked me up several times in a row. That was really not okay. Of course, I was rude, misbehaved, did not obey my parents, and even did something illegal. But I knew that I did not deserve such punishment. And then my brain invented an invulnerable defense. I began to fantasize about being a foster child. Just imagine how stunned I was when I discovered it to be true. Now, I didn't dig out any documents or some other proofs like letters from an old nurse. Everything was much more simple, and still quite complicated at the same time. At the time, I was a fan of various detective series, such as Sherlock, True Detective, and Dr. House, and I put my deductive skills to good use. My first investigation target was my boyfriend. Well, more like my ex-boyfriend, actually. It turned out that he did not help his father in the garage, but was quite engaged in weightlifting. I assumed that because the girl with whom he cheated on me weighed no less than a ton. Seriously! When I found out about that, I wasn't even able to throw a proper tantrum because the situation itself was funny. He actually already punished himself when he had an affair with that pig. I just laughed at them, wished them personal happiness and an experienced nutritionist, and left. And then I decided to check whether my parents were hiding anything from me. By that time, our relationship was coming apart at the seams. I even tried to avoid them and left the house, only through the window, which did not stop me from tracking them, by the way. I first suspected that something was amiss when I watched the Dr. House episode where they talked about genetics. They said that the moles and dimples on the chin were among the most important indicators. And yeah, I had a dimple on my chin, and also some dimples on my cheeks when I smiled, and my parents did not have any. I threw that at my parents' faces during another quarrel, but Mom and Dad only laughed and said that all this nonsense wouldn't help me to escape the house again. And in a day, they actually installed bars on my windows. I was locked in my house. Can you imagine that? How did they even know that I used windows to escape? I was always so careful. Well, it was for the better. I've got a lot of free time now being locked like that, and I used it to collect any information about my birth. Suddenly, it became very important for me to prove to myself that these two were not my real parents. Funny thing is that I actually managed to find the required proof. I lied and I acted like a cute girl. But thanks to it, I found out that there were cases of misplaced children in the hospital where I was born. I even got some photographs. They were made during the discharge from the hospital. And there, I saw two women who could hypothetically be my real mom. So now I was finally convinced that my parents weren't actually related to me. And since they were nothing to me, why were they messing with my life? So during the next scandal, I told them everything and showed them the photos from the hospital and all my calculations. Dad, as usual, wanted to punish me, and my mother cried, but I didn't care. I was not going to allow them to beat me once again, or to play the pity angle. They were just strangers. And I had enough of them. I have suffered enough. At that moment, I got up, packed my things, and got out with a bang. I did not want any more of their stupid demands and would not tolerate any more humiliation.
Hi, people. I'm Erica's mother, and my husband and I live in a complete nightmare. I don't know at what point our life turned into the freak horror show, but I want those who watch this story to draw the right conclusions. When Erica was a small child, she was our little princess, our beloved daughter. No, we still love her, but now she thinks that we're horrible, and I guess I know why. It's our own fault that we raised a monster. I love her too much, spoiled her too much, and taught her that the whole world owed her something. And when she got older and discovered that she actually had some responsibilities, Erica's world broke apart. We should have gone to a therapist right away. Unfortunately, we had no idea that ordinary teenage tantrums would result in a full-blown nightmare. You see, those were just normal arguments. What to wear, what to eat, where to go, just like that. And yes, my husband and I turned a blind eye to many conflicts because they were really insignificant. You really don't pay much attention to a child who wants to wear a blue dress instead of a pink one. Just let her win. Unfortunately, those childish conflicts turned into an atmosphere of total disrespect over time. Erica constantly insulted us. For example, she never thought twice about saying bad words to me and my hubby. Our daughter was incredibly stubborn. She wanted to do whatever she wanted, no matter the cost. If my husband or I told her that it was cold outside and she needed to put on a jacket, Erica just had to leave the house wearing nothing but a t-shirt just to insult us. Of course, she always got sick because of it, but still insisted on acting against our advice or orders. Naturally, we punished her because of her rudeness and disobedience. She must have told you about the bench in the corner. You see, the bench appeared in our life much later, when we got tired of trying to convince her to be good. Erica was 10 years old at the moment, and it was the first time when she stole a chocolate bar from the store. I told her to bring it back, but she told me to go to hell, pushed me, and ran away. Such a good daughter, yeah. That was the moment when my husband and I decided to use brute force against her. It seemed that she understood nothing but force, and we were just trying to bring her back to her senses. You see, we were punished as children, but never actually used force in Erica's upbringing before. And since our persuasion and pleas weren't going anywhere, we resorted to actual punishments. That was our second grave mistake. But the more we tried to protect her, to show even with punishment that she was doing a lot of wrong stuff, the worse it got. Twice, we had to leave her in the hospital, in a drug addiction treatment unit. To be more precise, you see, our daughter had 2 near-death experiences concerning drugs before she was 14. Erica did not want to study at all. She wasn't going to come back to her senses. Each other day, our daughter ran away from home, always lied to us. and had a lot of grown-up guy friends. You certainly don't want to give your teenage kid a pat on the head and a candy when she comes home late at night intoxicated in torn and dirty clothes. My husband and I knew that we failed miserably while raising our daughter. Of course, we still tried to do something about her from time to time, but we mostly just gave up on her. Soon, Erica came up with the idea that we were actually her foster parents. We didn't know why she felt that way, and frankly speaking, at that point, we didn't even care. Of course, it was utter nonsense. I know for sure that we are the parents of this monster. I gave birth to her with my own womb. Well, I'd like to blame someone else's genes on her bad behavior, but I can't. She is our child. She is our fault. But now, she doesn't want to have anything in common with us. And we don't mind, especially after she began to tell the child services that she was being bullied and beaten at home. When Erica left us for the last time, my husband and I were actually relieved. Now we do not need to worry about her. Don't have to wonder whether the little monster will come back home or run away with some random guy. Don't have to cater to another overdose or even a random pregnancy. If she wants to think she's a foster kid, fine, whatever. We did everything we could. Now she's the mistress of her own fate, and so be it.